So it's lesson 3, part 3. We're just going to do a little more. We've done 2 pages where we've queried the database today. We're going to try a couple other ones. Okay, so all the code is up on GitHub if you need it. The link is in the chat. If there's anything kind of that you're missing that you need to refer to, obviously you'd need to put your own database credentials in. You won't be able to use mine. So this is one way that we might display a list of records from a query result, right? We might use an HTML table with rows and columns. What else do we commonly see? What other kind of HTML structures do we see commonly on web pages other than HTML tables for displaying a list of data? How else might we kind of package up a list and display it besides a grid? Where's this list on my screen coming from? So we show data in a table. We can also show data in a drop-down list. Yep, so we can query the database. So there's a query running here. It selects all of my current courses and fills them into a drop-down list. We can also use unordered lists, so something like this. So here's a website that my mom manages, right? The actual links in the navigation, this uses, if we inspect, this uses li and ul tags, right? We can see that the query results are displayed in ul and li tags. So we might do lists. So there's different ways. Using tables isn't the only way. Let's actually go back. Let's go back to our game titles and maybe let's format this as a little bit of an unordered list instead. Right? We've got this. We've got game titles. Just prints them across the screen. So let's format this as a bulleted list. And then we can also work on filling a dropdown like we've got here from our query result. So the code to connect to the database, run the query, fetch the result, all that stuff is the same, but what's different is the formatting about how we want to use HTML to kind of wrap or package our list. So let's go back to game titles for a minute. What would we need to do here? So instead of just printing the game titles across the screen, they're printed as a bulleted list. How could we do that? We need to add just a little bit of HTML. What HTML tags would we need to display this as a stacked list of bullets? Probably did this with Scott, created a list in HTML. Yeah, that's right. We could use a UL. So before my loop, let's create an unordered list. After the loop, let's end the list. And then let's wrap or package each title value in a side of a set. We'll embed it inside of li and end li tags. So I'll open an li tag first, I'll append on the title, and then we'll close it. That's it. This should be all we need. Well, no, Colton, this is the first page. This is the game titles. In the games, we're going to use a table. So we're going to have two versions. Right? This was our original page where we're just displaying the titles. So that's this page. Right? This one looks terrible. So we're going to use UL and LI to display them with bullets as a vertical list. So I'm going to leave games alone. So this is in game titles. So let's try this. We'll save that. And now we get a simple list. And again, we could use CSS to format this list if we wanted to. We'll leave that step out for now. So it's the same query each time. We're displaying data from the same table. Whoops. But we're using different HTML formatting. On game titles, we're going to use a bulleted list. On games, we're going to use a grid format instead. But all the code above, it's all the same. Connect, write the query, set up the query, run it, fetch the results. All the code is identical between these pages. Connect, write the query, set it up, run the results, fetch the results, and we're just using different HTML around our loop. Okay, one way to think of it is this HTML formatting around the loop, it's kind of like packaging a gift, right? You're going to buy somebody a birthday present. You know, the present, you buy a present, but you could package that present in different ways. What are some of the ways you could wrap a gift for a birthday? What could you use for wrapping or packaging? Fancy gift bags is one option, yep. What else could you use besides a fancy gift bag? You're going to give someone a birthday present. How else could you package it? Yeah, you could use paper, wrapping paper. You could use Star Wars wrapping paper. You could use a gift box. You could use cardboard, right? You could put it in an old shoebox with Star Wars wrapping paper. In all the cases, though, the gift inside doesn't change, right? Doesn't matter what you wrap it in. Whatever product is in there is the same. This is kind of the idea here, right? Our data on these two different pages, it's the same. Right? We're showing the game information in both cases. The only thing that's different is the HTML wrapping around it. Here we're wrapping it in UL and LI to get an output like this. Here we're using table, TR, and TD to get an output like this. But we're running the same query, we're showing the same data. So the HTML is like our gift wrapping, if you will. It controls what the format is, how the data actually looks when somebody sees it in the browser. So we can make a list, a bulleted list. We can make a table. We're going to make one more, package it. We also now want to package our game titles this way in a dropdown. So let's make one more page. This will be our last page for today. So I'm going to make a new PHP file. We'll call this game dropdown. Excuse me. So we're going to use the same connection, same query, but instead of using UL and LI, or instead of using table, TR, and TD, we're going to use tags to make and fill a drop-down list instead. So different wrapping. Put in a title here that says select a game. Now, a drop-down list is a form control, so we are just going to put it in a form. We don't really need another page for today because we just want to fill the drop-down for now. That's good enough. We'll put on a field set with a label. Our label will say choose a game. And we're going to use an HTML select tag. This will generate a drop-down list. So our name is game ID. Okay, so here's all our code so far. Just a form. We're not going to worry about submitting the form for now. We really just want to look at filling the drop-down for today. So I'm going to open this file up in my browser. We can have a look at it. So we just get this drop-down, but right now the drop-down is empty. We want our drop-down to kind of work like this. So when the page loads, it automatically populates all our game titles into the list. So inside my select tag, I'm going to add our block of PHP code here. So we're going to connect. We're going to set up and run the query. This will say setup, run query, and store results. And then we will loop through results, adding an option for every game to the dropdown. And then we'll disconnect. So the first, everything, we've kind of got 4 steps here. The first step, the second step, and the last step, that's exactly the same as what we've already done on our other pages, right? So this is going to start to get a bit repetitive. That's good. If it gets repetitive, it'll get familiar. So I'm going to connect. And I could copy and paste this line from my other file, but by typing it regularly, I really get to learn it properly. It also makes me be exact with my syntax, which will help me be a better programmer and reduce the errors I make. And I've memorized my password because I've typed it so many times rather than just copying and pasting it. When you copy and paste it, you never internalize it. When you type the value again and again, you start to remember it. So there's my connection, exactly the same as on our other pages. My query is going to be the same too. Select star from games. I think on our other pages we had select and from in lowercase. That's fine. By convention, it's common programmer practice when you're writing SQL commands to type the SQL keywords in uppercase, but it's optional. You don't have to do that. We'll create our command variable that connects our database connection and our SQL query. Again, identical to what we've already done twice. I'm going to execute my query. and we'll call fetch all on the command. So this code is identical to the 5 lines on both game titles and games. We're doing the same things. So if you want to copy the code from those pages, you can. Like I said, typing it actually helps you internalize it. What do I need to do here on line 26 to disconnect? So when we're all done, we'll disconnect. So what should we do down at the bottom? We're creating our database connection on line 15.
We set it to null.
You got it, Chris. Thank you. We just set our connection to null. That disconnects. So all of this is the same. Now we just need our loop. I'm going to use the same loop structure for each one of our games. And we can use v if we like. This is just a variable, so if you want to call this something else, go right ahead. So we've got a select tag, and we want to use the option tag to create a new item in the drop-down menu. So we're going to echo an option tag. Now it gets a little bit messy here. Our options have a value. So the value, for the value, we're going to use our game ID. So this will be the value of each option. But then we want to display not the ID, which isn't meaningful. We want to display the title. So as we loop through, for every game, we're creating a new option tag. We're setting the value equal to the ID of the game, but then we're displaying the game title. And if I look on Blackboard at this drop-down list, it does the same. It shows me the name of the course here. But if I inspect the elements, here's our drop-down list. Here's my select. You can see the values are the IDs. Even though it displays the names of the courses, it actually stores an ID instead. So we're doing the same thing here. We're displaying the title, but we're actually storing the ID. So now I'll go back and refresh my drop-down. Well, that's interesting. I think we've got an error here. What happened? There's an error. This breaks. Whoops, because I'm missing a quote. I opened a double quote here. I forgot to close it. Sorry, yeah, that's, okay, David, good question. Let me explain. I'll put this in the chat. That's a great question. I'm just going to refresh and make sure I fixed it. There we go. So now we get all the games. Right. So the value, right? We're injecting a PHP variable inside of this value attribute. So now it's showing our list of games. Again, we're just changing the packaging, right? We used, whoops. Still showing me the old version. I don't know why. I guess it's cached. That's interesting. Am I missing something? Value equals. Now there's one last thing we could do. So we're running the same query. We're just using a select tag and option tags instead of table or list tags. Just going to try this in Chrome for just a second. Make sure I did it totally right. We're going to make one small enhancement and we're going to call it a day. Okay, yeah, it's just cached. So now you can see we get our different options. For every option in the loop, it prints out the ID, displays the title, ends the option. Then our loop goes to the next game, adds the ID as the value, prints the title, ends the option. Now there is one small improvement we could make. How could we make this a little more user-friendly? It's functional, but we should make one change to it just to make it a little easier to work with. Think about if we have like 100 games in the list. What's the problem with the dropdown, the way we're displaying the games? It's functional, but it might become hard.
To scroll.
Yeah, there's no logical order. So if the list gets long, sorry, Chris, is that what you were saying as well? We started talking at the same time.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And David said as well, right? If the list gets long, these show up in order by ID, which means it's going to be hard to find something in the list. So we can modify our SQL command a little bit. So instead of showing the games by ID, we maybe want to show them alphabetically from A to Z. So you probably haven't learned this in your database class yet. Maybe you have. Anybody have an idea how we can modify our select so that it actually sorts them from A to Z? Have you done that with Mazir or not yet? Okay. You will, but I will show you. So in SQL, we've got a simple couple of keywords. We can add order by. Which column should we order by? Which column in the games table do we want to order by so our list is alphabetical? Right now, without an order by, it orders by the primary key, by our ID field. Colton and David, you got it. We want to order by title. An order by also allows you, we're not going to use it, if we wanted it in descending order from Z to A, we could add descending. But I want it in ascending order, which is the default. So we can just leave that out. Yeah, apparently you guys did. Collaboration is good. So here's our modified query. We're going to get all the games, but we want them sorted by the title. So now, when I refresh my list, notice what happens. It's now sorted A to Z. And anytime we add a new game, it's going to appear in this list based on what letter the title begins with. So it's a little easier to sort through this list and find a game if the list gets long. So we've now written 3 separate pages today. They all are reading data from the games table, but they're all formatting. Let's go back here. So we have 3 versions. We have our game titles, our games, and our game dropdown. So here was our first page where we're using UL and LI to show our games in a list. Here's our second page where we're using table, TR, and TD to show our games in a grid. Here's our third page where we're showing our games in a dropdown. And almost all the code to connect, fetch the data, right? These three lines are absolutely identical. The only thing we changed here was we just added some sorting. And then we're just changing the wrapping or the packaging. This is our fancy gift bag or our Star Wars wrapping paper. So we can display the data in different ways: drop downs, lists, or grids. And a huge part of web programming, the biggest part of any web programming, is actually what we did today. So being able to connect to the database, fetch the information a user wants to see, and then display it back to the browser using whatever HTML is appropriate. Right? So we could use a table, we can use a list, we can use a drop-down, we might even use, you can't really control that, Michael, that's kind of up to the browser. It's a good question, but that's not something we really have a handle on. Browser's going to render it how it wants. Right? Even if we're looking at an image gallery, let's say something like a Facebook photo album, you're looking at somebody's Instagram page. All it is a query, and instead for the wrapping, they use image tags, right? Every record is displayed as an image. That's what a photo gallery is. Any sort of online photo gallery, that's all it is. There's a query that fetches a list of image names, it loops through, and for every image it displays, it wraps the image in an IMG tag instead. Right? So we can read and display almost anything from any database. It's just a question of which wrapping or packaging do we want to use. Okay, I'm going to upload all my code for today, upload it back up to GitHub. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up for today? So this page, this is basically what you're creating a version of for your lab, except your lab is going to show the information about your relatives. So you have your lab and you have your quiz. The quiz is in the week 4 folder. Your lab is in the assignments section, and they're both due next Tuesday at 5. Okay, folks, well, I think we will call this one a wrap. So I'm going to stop my recording. I will take out my password and upload everything to GitHub so you have it as a reference. If you need for the lab, please don't just copy and paste, but it's there for you to refer to as you write your own code. And I will see you all next week. I hope the rest of your week is excellent.